Okay, I think it's about that time. Welcome back, everyone. As is our tradition, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so I ask you all to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, have a seat. Thanks for coming out on a nippy evening. We got a treat for you tonight with some architecture. Next month, it's our own Dave Crum is going to be talking about when we had a department store in Milton. And he's a reigning expert on the topic, as he is with so many things. With that, I'm going to ask Dave to come on up and introduce our special guest tonight.
That might be the best thing to do.
Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Bill Lattin. Some of you may already know him. Bill is the former historian for Orleans County. He knows everything about Orleans County and probably other counties as well. And also Doug Farley is here is helping out. And Doug, are you the president of the Cobblestone Society? Director of the Cobblestone Society. So we have some esteemed people with us who know a lot about Orleans County. And Bill, I'm not going to go into his program, but I've seen it before and it's really good and makes you think about some of the things we've all lost over the years due to progress and that sort of thing. So Bill, with that, take this stand. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Let's give him a nice hand.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure, an honor to be here to present this program on destroyed architecture. I was Orleans County historian for 34 years, and as one of the jobs I did as county historian was to do a weekly column. And so I did a series of stories on buildings that had been destroyed in Orleans County, buildings that I felt were significantly important architecturally. And after doing a number of these columns, I finally decided, well, they could go together in a book. And so the first book on destroyed architecture was published in 1984. The book that we have tonight is an updated version with some examples that have been included that we still had in 1984. And this was made possible with a grant from the New York State Council on the Arts through GoArt, Genesee Orleans Council on the Arts. Oscar Wilde wrote, "To me, beauty is the wonder of wonders. It is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances. The true mystery of the world is the visible, not the invisible." The building you see on the screen was built in the mid-1870s for the Albion Village Hall. This is the way it looks today. This is what happened to it in the late 1960s. I'll begin with a story from one of Aesop's fables. As a cock was scratching up the straw in a farmyard in search of food for the hens, he came upon a jewel which by some chance had found its way there. "Oh," said he, "you are a very fine thing, no doubt, to those who prize you. But give me a barleycorn before all the pearls in the world." Now he was a sensible cock, but there are many silly people who despise what is precious only because they cannot understand it. I think that's what we see happening here. People who did not understand it. Unfortunately, this very fine example of the Second Empire style was destroyed, and of course it has never been replaced in any way. We do have some success stories in Orleans County, so I'll begin with several. The Farmers Hall is an important building on the campus of the Cobblestone Society Museum at Childs. The upper right-hand picture shows us dismantling that building, which was located in Kendall, and we moved it to Childs in 1978. It had been built for a Universalist church in Kendall in 1855, was later the Kendall Town Hall, and when they built a new town hall in the 1960s, this building was no longer used. And the Kendall Fire Department was anxious to burn it down for a practice fire. I heard about this, and so I approached the town supervisor, Michael Paduchek, and he said I asked him if they would consider giving us the building so that we could move it to Childs. And I quote what he said, "Well, you'd be doing me a real favor if you could get that out of there." He had postponed the practice fire on the building for several years. So as a result, we were able to move the building and reuse it as an exhibition hall for farming tools. Otherwise, this very nice example of Greek Revival architecture would have been destroyed. Typical features of Greek Revival architecture are columns or pilasters, low-pitched roofs with a wide, what's known as an entablature or eaves under the edge of the roof line. Next to the Farmers Hall, the little white building in the middle, that too was in danger, and we were able to acquire that in 1987. It was built in 1838 as a shoe shop. It was later used for various purposes, and we were finally able to acquire that building for now a harness shop at the Cobblestone Museum. And next to that, the little gray and green building was built as an office for a lumber yard in Medina. The man who had the building in 1977, as part of the lumber yard that he was running, was going to tear it down, and that was the first building that we moved to the museum. It now serves as a print shop, a working print shop at the Cobblestone Museum. A nice example of the Second Empire style because of that mansard roof on the little porch and the high-pitched roof. And now we'll launch into some buildings that have been demolished. This example here was a very nice example of the federal style of architecture, built in 1827. We notice the fan-shaped decorative things over the windows and the doors. Very slender pillars on the porch, and of course a low-pitched roof. This was torn down to make way for a theater in 1924, and remains now, after the theater is gone, kind of a driveway into a parking lot. This beautiful example of the federal style of architecture, built by Universalists in Clarendon in 1837, served as the Universalist church until about 1960, then was taken over by a private family foundation. When they had to start paying taxes on the building because they were not tax exempt, they tried to give it away to several organizations. Nobody wanted it. It was sold, and eventually it went up for taxes, and the man who acquired the property simply demolished it. There's now a produce stand on that site. It was one of the best examples of architecture the town of Clarendon had. This beautiful mansion located on South Main Street in Albion, also in the Greek Revival style, served as the Clark residence. It was later in the 1940s owned by Birdseye Laboratory, and when they moved out of Albion in the 1960s, it was used for office space, and eventually it was turned into a strip mall. So we see now in its place a Family Dollar. This beautiful mansion, Greek Revival in Holly, was on a loop of the old Erie Canal. It unfortunately was torn down in the 1930s, and the site today is a box store where the canal has been filled in. Another fine example of Greek Revival architecture was this Shelby Center Hotel, built about 1840. And in some cases, buildings do not have to be totally demolished to be totally ruined in their appearance. We can see that the present owner thought they were doing a wonderful job in repurposing the building, and consequently, all the Greek Revival detailing on the building was totally destroyed. We've lost cobblestone buildings in Orleans County and other places as well. The Rich's Corners School, built in 1846 for, I believe, $550. They gathered stones from the beaches of Lake Ontario, flat lake wash stones, and the front of the building was laid in the herringbone pattern. After centralization, the building stood vacant for about 10 years, eventually was bought by a neighbor and torn down. It remains a vacant lot. We had a cobblestone foundry in Albion. The Curtis Foundry made plows and other farm equipment. It was located right next to the canal so that casting sand could be easily shipped in, pig iron, and likewise the products that were cast at this foundry could easily be shipped out on the canal. The main 2.5-story building was demolished in the 1890s, and the back end of the building, which is the Lake Country Penny Saver building now, still retains part of the original cobblestone wall. But that's all that remains of this wonderful 2.5-story cobblestone foundry. From Greek Revival architecture, when people in the 19th century sort of tired of that very classical style, they then turned in a few cases to using Gothic Revival for domestic architecture. This extraordinary mansion located in Medina was a very fine example of the Gothic Revival style, with high-pitched roofs, decorative cut-out wooden work along the edge of the roofs, known sometimes as gingerbread, Gothic-shaped windows. This was demolished and remains part of the site as part of the State Street Park in Medina. A late example of Gothic architecture was this building, built for a county hospital in 1903. It served the county until 1962, when a new infirmary was built. Was demolished and is the site of a bunker that was made there for civil defense on that site. From the Gothic style, we find that the next style that came along that was popular with Victorian people was known as Italianate. This fine house was located at the Bridges, Orleans County. It was built by the Brown family in the Second Empire style. Characteristics of this style include low-pitched roofs, usually cupolas or towers, round-headed windows, and sometimes wide overhangs supported by decorative brackets. This extraordinary brick mansion was built in 1877 in Albion by William Swan. We notice here a 5-story tower. This house was owned by 2 different families, and by the 1940s, houses of this sort were not at all appreciated by that generation. It was sold to a gasoline company, and they built a gasoline station on this corner at routes 31 and 98 in Albion. The gasoline station is long gone, and this now serves as a parking lot for Walgreens. What a loss. Another example of the same style of Italianate was a building built for the Orleans County poorhouse, or county home or almshouse in 1878. It was in the style of Italianate. Unfortunately, this building, which was in really remarkably good condition, was demolished in 1962, and that was also part of the present bunker put there by Orleans County Civil Defense. Another nice Italianate building was this house. It was the home of William Dye, mayor of Albion, a clothier, well-to-do businessman. In 1929, this became Albion's first funeral home, which was operated by the McNall brothers. In the early 1970s, the property was purchased by Liberty Bank. The bank tore the house down, built sort of an ugly building in its site, and the bank is now long gone, and now that building that remains is the Orleans County Treasurer's Office. Right across the street from that was this 3-story mansion, also in the Italianate style. We notice here the very prominent brackets supporting the roof. One of the characteristics of this style are double window combinations. But by 1970, this was sold, and Carol's Restaurant came in and tore it down and built a restaurant on this site, now Burger King. And half a block down the street was the home of John G. Sawyer, a United States congressman. Another fine example of the Italianate style. We see all the characteristics of that style, with a low-pitched roof, the bracketed overhang, the cupola on the roof, and arched openings between the supportive pillars on the porch, and also some round-headed windows. The drawing here is a drawing I made when I think I was about 12 or 13 years old, and it's the only picture I can find of this house that was demolished in 1958. It remains now a part of a park in the village of Albion. It seems that St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church bought 2 houses here on South Clinton Street. They had the houses torn down because the priest and the parish council were determined they were going to build a junior high school on this site. And eventually the bishop from the Buffalo diocese came forward and said, "Oh, no, you're not." So 2 houses were lost for naught. The St. Joseph's Parish held on to the lot for a number of years and finally just turned it over to the village. Unusual combination of architecture here, and we find that in some buildings. It's essentially an Italianate style house, but the bay window, excuse my poor perspective, had a mansard roof on it. These mansard roofs are roofs, of course, with steep sides and flat tops. There were a number of Italianate business blocks built in the village of Albion. This fine hotel, 1863 to 1994, a fire did some minor damage in the rear of the building. The village board found the owner and the tenants undesirable, and so when the fire alarm sounded, the Albion Fire Department calculated for about 45 minutes how they were going to put out the fire. Very questionable. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the village had come in and bulldozed the building. The owner of the property was not consulted, and as a result, the village ended up paying a hefty lawsuit after she sued. It remains a parking lot. This house was owned by E. Kirk Hart. It was an older home that he rebuilt in 1873 with a mansard roof, added the 3rd story to it. So this style of architecture we refer to as mansard or Second Empire. Hart was also a congressman from Orleans County for one term. And Hart also owned what's known as Hart Island in the St. Lawrence. And he sold it to Bolt, who built a Bolt Castle on that island. So Hart was a very wealthy, prominent person in Albion and had this extraordinary mansion. The village wouldn't relax taxes on it when the family no longer wanted it. It stood vacant for a number of years, and finally the family just had it torn down. It was a vacant lot for many years, and eventually W.T. Grant came in and built a store on this site. That has since been demolished, and now this is a parking lot for the Hoyt Library in Albion. Another form of architecture that came along in the latter part of the 19th century, particularly popular for resort architecture in the 1880s, is known as the stick style. This fantastic cottage at Lakeside Bluff on Johnson's Creek, just off of Lake Ontario, was built by the prominent Cook family out of Medina. And as we can see here, they had a 4-story attached gazebo. Characteristics of the stick style are high-pitched roofs, and the decorative elements are made to look like supportive elements of the architecture. So structural parts were highlighted to become decorative. The cottage got on fire rather mysteriously in the wintertime. The fire truck was a half a mile away in a garage, and they couldn't get it started. So the building burned, and this remains a vacant lot today. This also is in the stick style, a little more refined than the resort style stick buildings. But we do see architectural elements which look like they're supportive brackets. High-pitched roof again. In the gables we see those crisscross brackets which give the appearance of being structural support. And here a mansard roof on the porch. So sometimes with Victorian architecture they combine different elements of different styles. And we see that quite prominently in buildings known as Queen Anne. These late 19th century buildings have a combination of windows. In this house, which was located in Medina, we see over the front door on the second floor a Palladian window, which is colonial in style. Two different types of windows in the attic. A double combination of windows in a bedroom, and the window under the porch roof is divided 1/3 and 2/3 in its division of space. Spindle work was popular in these buildings, and we see that with the decorative grill work under the porch roof and the curved corner on the porch. A combination of different things put together. Typical Queen Anne. Another example of Queen Anne was this wonderful house in Albion. And sometimes Queen Anne buildings have multiple kinds of building materials in them. This Queen Anne house from 1888 had the first floor made of Medina sandstone. The second floor was in the shingle style. It's hard to see because of the vines, but the second story was natural wood shingles, and the attic story was stucco, sort of Tudor in style. Unfortunately, this was torn down for Bell's Supermarket in 1967 and is part of a strip mall today, parking lot. This wonderful Medina sandstone school, built in Medina for a high school in 1897, wasn't used too long as a high school. By the 1920s, they wanted a new high school building, and this stone building, which was only 20-some years old at the time when they wanted a new building, was in the way. They didn't want to tear it down. So they moved this sandstone building. It sounds impossible, but there are pictures of it when it was being moved, and they had huge steel I-beams under it. They moved it about 60 to 70 feet off its original site, closer to the corner on South Academy Street in Medina. And the most unbelievable part of the story is they moved it while classes were in session. So that meant for a period of time, the gas was disconnected, the water was disconnected, and the electric power was disconnected. When students came out at noontime, they came out at a different location on the sidewalk. And that story was told to me by 2 or 3 different older people when I was first county historian. It really happened. They moved the building with the kids in it. Can you imagine the insurance companies now? Unfortunately, after this was used for classes, it became a library for a short period of time, district offices. A fire did some damage to the interior in February 1967, and rather than preserve the building, it was demolished, and we now have a parking lot. Another example of this use of Medina sandstone was the Orleans County Jail, built in 1903, a fantastic building. The picture here shows the sheriff's residence and the sheriff's office to the right of that building. The Board of Supervisors in the early 1970s determined because of state mandates, they had to have a new jail. And so, unfortunately, this nice example of Medina sandstone was demolished, and they built in its place what you see to the right here. This style of architecture does have a name. It was popular in the 1970s, and I hate to admit it, but it is a very good example of brutalism. We find that the college campuses that had buildings added to them at that period of time, Brockport included, some of the architecture is known as brutalism. Out in a field all by itself, this would be fine. But in a historic village with all historic properties around it on the National Register, this building is at least an intrusion. It was Shakespeare who said, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And in this case, it's just in the wrong place. Another example of the use of Medina sandstone was this elementary school built in Medina. It was eventually demolished when a new school was built down the street several blocks. The district tore it down. Vacant lots stood there for several years and eventually was subdivided to make way for some insignificant ranch houses. Unfortunately, we lost the Knowlesville Presbyterian Church. The original church on this site was in the federal style of architecture. By the 1890s, this had become a very wealthy congregation. They decided they wanted a new church edifice. The old church building was torn down, and on the same lot they built this building in the Victorian Romanesque style. High-pitched roofs, round-headed openings are typical of buildings of this style. Where towers are used, they're sort of tucked in and not very tall in their appearance. The auditorium or sanctuary in this church was square, and the center hall or center aisle ran diagonally, if you can imagine this, it ran diagonally from the southwest corner of the sanctuary to the northeast corner of the sanctuary. And in the northeast corner was a low platform where the pulpit was located. The pews were semicircular either side of the center aisle. And this church, amazingly, I believe it was in 1906, acquired a grant from, of all people, Andrew Carnegie to buy a pipe organ. All was demolished when the church congregation dissolved. The presbytery no longer wanted it. They came in and tore it down without too much notification ahead of time, and it remains a vacant lot. In Holly, this whole section of buildings was demolished in 1962 for a bank. The bank here in the center portion of this picture had a Spanish tile roof on it. It, however, was a somewhat colonial revival in its style. All these business blocks were demolished to make way for a bank. The bank is out of business, and part of that bank building, I believe, is vacant today. In Medina was a theater built in 1915. It had a Medina sandstone front on it. It was built in the colonial revival style. So we've come full circle from the federal style of architecture popular in the 1830s to early 20th century buildings being built in somewhat the same style of architecture. Colonial revival, usually low-pitched roofs, The entrance doors to this theater were obviously a very colonial revival, colonial looking in their style, and they were made of cast concrete, but the facing on the building were blocks of Medina sandstone. Attempts were made to use it for different things, and finally it was just demolished for a parking lot. One of the finest examples of the colonial revival style was this home, built in 1905 by a prominent attorney in Albion. All the wonderful characteristics of what you would see in a really fine colonial revival residence. The pillars had Corinthian capitals on them. The curved porch, reminiscent of the south porch of the White House. The balustrade around the roof. Just an extraordinary example of the style of architecture. The front hall was a wide hall. It had a center flight of stairs that went up to a landing about 2/3 of the way up, and then the landing split into two parts. So that then there were two separate little staircases to the second floor, with a beautiful Palladian stained glass window on the landing. Of course, all demolished. In downtown Albion, the Albion firemen built this hose tower in 1880. Now, many fire departments or fire stations years ago had a hose tower. And any of that I've ever seen, the hose tower was connected to the fire station. But in Albion, the hose tower was a separate building. It went up 60-some feet, and you see there's a chimney on it. That was so that after a fire hose was used, was wet, they could bring the fire hose back, hook it onto a pulley system, pull it up into the top of the tower so the hose would stretch out and drain out, and then they could have a fire in the stove in the tower to then help dry out the hose as the water dripped into a drain in the floor at the bottom of the hose tower. Rather than recognizing the significance of this unique piece of American architecture, instead of restoring it, it was simply demolished in 1959 and remains a vacant site. And our last picture for this program is really not architectural, it's more sculptural, although the architectural base still remains. I took a picture of this statue in 1972, and if I hadn't taken a picture of this statue, we wouldn't have this image. It was later stolen. And I believe it was probably taken by somebody who maybe sold it to an antique dealer. It may be adorning somebody's garden somewhere. But unfortunately, this statue is gone. And the information about the statue remains on the base of the statue. And I'll tell you what it says on the base. Zelotes R., only son of A.J. and Ellen M. Rice Warren, died December 1st, 1889, aged 11 years, 10 months, erected by his mother in 1905. So this, I think, is a sort of a quasi-example of Zelotes Warren. I want to end with a couple of quotes. This one from Kenneth R. Patton, a well-revered Unitarian theologian. And he writes, "We have set ourselves over many things. We have gathered terrible powers into our hands. We have made ourselves masters of the planet, users of its stores, governors of its teeming life, exploiters of its energies of fire and fission. We have built and we have torn down. We have created and we have despoiled. We have chosen ourselves to be the leaders. But where are we leading the earth and its creatures? And let me end with this quote from Carl Sandburg, who simply said, "There ought to be an 11th commandment, and it should state, 'Thou shalt not commit nincompoopery.'" Thank you very much.
We'll have some questions, I think. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I got one here.
Go ahead.
It seemed like most of this construction was in the 60s or 70s. There was no preservation at that time,
We saw this happen across the country with urban renewal that same period of time. And I think the thinking was with village board people in Albion and other communities, they were more open to what they thought was progress rather than understanding their heritage and utilizing that to its best. Yes?
Where would the money have come to save some of these buildings?
Well, that is always a problem. When the Cobblestone Society was established in 1960, it started with zero.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of encouraging people to give, and many people did step forward, not only giving their financial help, but also expertise and millions of volunteer hours to help preserve things.
What about New York State? Did New York State give up any money to preserve some of the landmarks?
I think in some cases, yes, through the New York State Department of Parks and Recreation and Historic Preservation, which one of my daughters works for in Albany. But it's sometimes hard to get those grants because it is public funds. And it's important that buildings be on the National Register of Historic Places. That helps too in obtaining grant money for preservation purposes. Yes, David.
We certainly lost a lot of buildings here in Hilton and Parma. We didn't have the fine examples. We had a few, but not like Orleans County did. I think the canal maybe brought more wealth along that way, but a lot of ours have gone through fire, a lot of fires, and also neglect. Yeah. And yet, do you see things turning the corner a little bit from your perspective?
I think over the last 50 years, there's been more interest since our bicentennial in 1976. That was a beginning, I think. People started to become aware of the importance of the preservation of neighborhoods.
Bill, what lessons can we learn or can we adapt and bring forward now to think about how we can preserve significant pieces of architecture here? You know?
Well, it's making people aware of its importance, and sometimes people aren't aware of the value of things, and with several buildings that we've preserved at the Cobblestone Museum, it's reuse. So a historic building can be usable in today's world if you use a little imagination.
So education is one.
Education is very important.
Bill mentioned it, but an important program is the incentive that New York State offers those who want to preserve a historic building. They don't give you their money. Well, I guess they give you their money, so to speak, but they're giving you back your money. You can take a 50% tax credit against any work you do on a historic property. So first is get it on the register, work with your local preservation committee, whoever is in your community that is interested in preservation, get your property on the National Register, and then from then on in, any 50% of any work you do in your home money is returned to you by the federal or state government. That's a financial resource that's open to anyone.
that message needs to get out loud and clear to.
That's why we're
lots of
here.
people.
You make an important point. I've often quoted these words from Margaret Mead. She said, 95% of the people are inert. 2% are a-holes. And the rest do what they say they can. So that 3% is what you need to plug into. That's what's going to do it. It's the people who do what they say they can do. And you have to seek them out. Sometimes they're hard to find. Yes?
So what did happen to all the Medina sandstone from all these being destroyed, all these buildings? What happened to the sandstone?
Landfill.
Really?
A lot of it just went that way.
Today, Medina sandstone holds a value. You know, those cut stones that
Oh,
we
yes.
use for sidewalks and things.
Mm-hmm.
With our Heinz plant here in town, which is Medina sandstone, they took off the roof caps, and they have been able to sell quite a few of those for a good $1. But unfortunately, back in the day that some years went,
No,
they weren't thinking.
they saw no value to that. No, saw no value to it at all. No. Yes, sir.
I'm very familiar with Beechwood Cemetery, but how long before it was noticed that that statue had been taken? And what was the route of egress? Did they take it out Woodchuck Alley, or, I mean, I have no idea.
I have no idea.
It couldn't have been a,
It could have been
20
gone
minute
2 or 3
ride.
years before I discovered it's missing.
It's quite rural there, so.
Very rural.
and lots of mosquitoes.
Yeah, and you mentioned Woodchuck Alley, it's a dirt road, so it would have been easy to come in at night and,
Even in the winter.
yeah, take it, and gone. And I have seen statuary like that at antique shops, and knowing darn well came from some cemetery. You know, especially the things that aren't so obviously religious. You know, you look at that doesn't come across as a religious statue per se. It's rather secular. So, you know, it could be a garden statuary.
Any recollection of how tall the actual figure was?
Oh, I recall it's about probably about 2 feet high.
Oh, okay.
Or it had to be at least 2 feet high, maybe a little more than 2. Could have been 30 inches high.
And of course, that is the base that's still there.
The base is still there. Mhm.
It does look big. It looks.
Base is probably 3 feet tall.
Yeah, the base comes up, like this, maybe about 4 feet, 3.5, 4 feet high.
Just to get off base a little bit, are you familiar with Don Hall's presentation of the ghost house of East Avenue?
I knew Don Hall. Mhm.
Yeah, he did a wonderful presentation. Same story, all these beautiful homes along East Avenue completely demolished.
Yes, he did a wonderful presentation on the zinc monuments
Oh, yes.
in cemeteries. He's recently passed away, I understand.
Over here we go.
Yes.
The cobblestone house at Childs, you said that was moved there?
Not the cobblestone buildings.
Oh, okay,
The-
all right.
We moved.
I was trying to wrap my head around how in the world they would ever move a cobblestone house.
We did move a smokehouse, but it was totally dismantled. And there was no way of numbering the stones to put them back just the same way. So the smokehouse came from over near Scottsville. This was done in the late 90s. And then we used the heap of cobblestone using the old recipe for soft lime mortar to do classes and training students that wanted to know how to do cobblestone masonry repair. So students put together the smokehouse, same scale, dimensions and all, but it wasn't quite like it started out in Scottsville. Yes.
One more question, Bill. Did you ever interview any of the students who were in the school when it was being moved to get their reaction?
Just kind of in passing. I never sat down with a pad or anything to interview, but there were at least 3 different people that I recall telling me at different times, oh yeah, I was in that school when it was being moved.
Oh.
Yes.
Do you know anything about the Erie Mansion in Newark?
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a picture of it. It says it's historically haunted. Interesting, but a lot of old places.
Okay, well, Bill, thank you very much. We appreciate it again. We need you